Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us on a Friday. My name is Monique Henry-Hudson. I graduated from the BFA Computer Art department in 2011, and that is just wild to think about in time. Um, I I have a podcast and a website called Simple Robotics, which is kind of cultivating itself to be like a personal account of my career journey and exploration. And the podcast is just an audio form of that. And about 2 years ago, my best friend from junior high and I started DiverseToons, which is a traveling animation panel series just highlighting the need for diversity in the animation community, and also just like letting us hear from people that look like us and come from similar backgrounds doing the type of work that we want to do. So that's my spiel. And I have with me a couple other people who have graduated from SVA, be it from BFA, MFA. And as the panel description is, like, we're just going to be talking about our time at SVA, what we're doing now, and like a bunch of things in between. I'm going to start off with Courtney Pure, who I actually was at SVA with me. And maybe she remembers how we met because I don't anymore. But what's really cool is Courtney was in the animation program. And as you all know, animation is basically across town from BFA. So that's why I kind of don't remember how we met, if it was an elective class or something. But we were going through our journey at the same time. So that's also why I thought it was important that she's on here. So Courtney, take it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm Courtney Pure. If I remember correctly, I think we did take a class together. It was like a humanities class, but we also worked on an internship.
I remember
together.
that internship, yeah.
Yes. So I think that's where we really started to connect. And yeah, I think because I did not see you besides that. So yeah, as Monique mentioned, I graduated from SVA in 2011 from the traditional animation program. So I was all the way on the east side on First Avenue kind of area. And yeah, I've been working in animation as a freelancer mostly. I floated between live action, especially when I graduated school. I started working in live action, actually more on the administrative side. And then later on, I really wanted to focus in on a more creative outlet and career. So I started to do a lot more of my own animations and kind of working with local artists that were either on Long Island, which is where I'm based right now. It's about an hour and a half from the city. And just working with artists either in New York or Long Island mostly, but pretty much always open to anywhere. So that's kind of where I'm at now.
Joy?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Cool. Hello, everyone. So I'm an alumni from the MFA program from SVA. So I was studying computer art and then focusing on look development, lighting, and textures. And that's what my focus now at work. I work at Buck Design in New York. It's been 5 years. Almost 6 years since I started internship, so I guess I tell you how old I am. But I guess it was quite a journey being an international student. So I came from Taiwan and studied fine arts, and back then we have no job, I guess, for being a fine artist. So it was difficult. So I was looking into more applied art. So I thought animation is a good mix with digital media and fine arts, because I can still do like painting in 3D, but for textures. And lighting is my favorite because it's like shaping the look of the shots. So, and then it has been great so far. And I learned a lot, built a lot of connections from my peers at SVA, and then we also have a lot of conferences going on between school and the East Coast and West Coast, like CGRAPH. So I've been just traveling to different conferences, meet people after school years, and now just working steadily at this moment
And
during the
Joy,
pandemic.
when did you graduate from the MFA program?
2014.
Okay. And
Yes.
next we'll go to Ruel.
Well, thank you. By the way, congrats on your new promotion. I saw that post. I guess I may be the oldest one in the alumni group here, I'm guessing. I graduated a BFA in 2004 from computer animation. I was born and raised in Jamaica. I moved to the States for high school. I went to an art high school in East Orange, New Jersey, so on the East Coast. And then I went to college in New York City, studied computer animation. And then I spent a year in New York doing a bit of commercials for a year. And then I moved to LA with a job offer that I got at Digital Domain on the visual effects side, but with the goal of transitioning it into character animation. And around that time, I think it was, my start was Flags of Our Fathers, Letters of Iwo Jima, Clint Eastwood film. And so I've been in the industry for about 16 years now. And, you know, across video games, commercials, feature films, both live action, visual effects, and animated. Over the past, I would say 6 to 7 years, it has kind of skyrocketed my career. I've been fortunate to work on Jungle Book, Black Panther, Captain Marvel. I did a little bit on like some game cinematics, and then I animation supervised for the Griffith Observatory show here. And the last project that I recently did was the Martin Luther King VR project for Time Magazine. And around then I decided it's time for me to transition into directing and, you know, telling my own stories. And so I've kind of pseudo recently transitioned into that. I just moved into directing and visual effects supervising for a small commercial house here in LA.
Okay, so then I actually am going to start off with Ruel first. Can you tell us, well, when you applied to go to SVA, what was like your dream job at the time? Like, what did you want to do? And like, why was, I guess, like SVA the choice for you to do what you want to do at that time? And then also, has that changed from what you're actually doing now? Like, are you doing exactly what you wanted when you originally like applied to SVA?
Gotcha. Then when I applied I just wanted to do animation, right? I was the kid in Jamaica that saw Lion King and said, I don't know what that is, but I want to do that. And so just to work on cartoons. And I think when I applied to SVA, or applied to an animation program, and SVA having a computer animation program, it was, I get to do this every day kind of thing. I don't have to go to a regular college. I can just spend my time doing art. And what happened was, how I ended up choosing SVA was, my three options were Academy of Art in San Francisco, Cal Arts in LA, and SVA. To me, it was like, those are the three of the options. I ended up getting a scholarship to SVA, and it also gave me the opportunity I've always wanted to live in New York City. And I think that's the biggest theme of what my input here in this conversation is being an artist, and, you know, going to an art school and then living in a city where it has a rich cultural art scene. So what made me land on SVA was, I get to live in New York City for 4 years. And so I knew the end goal was to move to California, specifically LA, because at that time in 2004, all the major studios that's where animation and visual effects was, predominantly LA over San Francisco. But, you know, all the big studios minus Blue Sky in New York City, all the other studios were in LA, and the work was there. So this gave me an opportunity to live in New York City, be an artist in New York City, and go to a really rich art school.
Joy?
Hi. So I can echo to like what you said about like the rich art scenes in New York, because that was one of the reason I decided to stay in New York when I applied. I actually forgot like if I got admitted to other school, but I just remember SVA was one of the top lists because my parents was worried that like, because inside New York it's very similar to Taipei, which is a city, but just 10 times bigger, I guess. So it's kind of similar, the lifestyle. You can take the subway, the train, and this is how it is like in Taiwan and Taipei. So that's why we decided to take that route. And then I never regret it because it's just so convenient that you can do a lot of spontaneous things in the city also, and also like network with different departments at school, because it's just not just animation. We have illustrations, we have photography, printmaking and stuff. So it was a lot of fun. And then there's also like continuing education. Even if I finish school, I still go back to SVA and take some classes for visual printing. So that was one of the reasons I picked New York. It's like it kind of reflects where I want to be an artist, like life, and I can also enjoy the opera, the music, the Broadway shows, and that was why I picked SVA.
And then also for you, Joy, since you already did your undergrad somewhere else,
Yeah.
did you feel like, well, I guess like you had a clear understanding of why you wanted to go to grad school and like this particular program, you knew that already coming in? Or did that like kind of change for you? Or did you gain more clarity as you were in school in the MFA program?
I feel like as you get older, your dream kind of shrinks a little bit. I used to want to do like movies, feature films, and live actions, but in New York, it's more motion graphics and commercial based. So when I was studying, I didn't know about it until I graduated. I was gonna go to San Francisco for my first, I went there for my first freelance job and decided to settle there, but then I got an internship back to New York. So I guess there is a bit difference like geographically in New York, like the East Side is more focusing on advertising, branding, marketing, whereas LA is like the feature film and live actions where I didn't know before. But I think for the program, I think it was helpful to practice like figuring out how do you resource your needs, and like we have independent studies and thesis advisors. That's where you kind of help yourself to get in touch with the industry professionals. And then I kind of learned more by doing that with our program, and I know how to outsource or resource my professors, like independent professors and stuff. Just so I think does that answer your questions?
Yeah.
Because I feel like it's hard to sum up. I think there's definitely a difference between your ideal situation and after you graduate. And I realized that I never imagined I would go for commercials, but right now here I am. And then, so I feel like, yeah.
I agree. I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Courtney?
So I didn't necessarily think that I was going to go into animation. It was only by chance that a friend of mine had recommended the animation program to me because I was very interested in art. To be honest, originally I thought I was going to go to school for like sciences or something like that. So I chose SVA because I really love drawing. I realized like towards the end of high school that I really love drawing a little bit more than science, and that I could kind of combine those two loves together. And that's pretty much what I'm doing now with my animation, is combining those two subjects together. And with SVA, I felt that I could get out of like all the other art schools, it was a much more like robust animation program. So it was super intensive that you know, it's just kind of like you're just focusing on animation. You don't have any minors. So you're pretty much dedicating your entire time to that. And I really like that setup because I like to be hyper focused on things. Like that's just kind of like my personality. So when I was in high school, I was very focused on academics, and that actually helped me with SVA because I got a partial academic scholarship just because of my grades. And then since I've already was kind of really focused in on that, in high school, I felt that I should go to SVA and kind of focus it on art, especially because when I was in high school, I wasn't like part of the, I know there was like advanced art classes and things like that. So I kind of had to work really hard in like my junior and senior year in order to like catch up as far as like building my portfolio and things like that. And I felt like that with the intensive program, I could, you know, get myself to where I needed to be. Because I also did a portfolio review with MICA, which is in Maryland. It's the Maryland Institute College of Art. And again, I was thinking of splitting between art and science, but felt ultimately that it would probably be better for me to just kind of zero in on this subject of animation. So.
And when you started at SVA, did you have like dreams of working on some super famous cartoon or in a particular studio? Or did you know like you really just wanted to draw?
I knew I just really wanted to like draw, and like I've always loved animation as a kid. Like my mom's favorite story is to talk about like when I was a kid, I had basically asked for 101 Dalmatians for my birthday from like every single person. And I ended up getting 4 VHS tapes like for that birthday. So like I knew that I was gravitated towards it, but at the time I didn't know that that was like a career. Like I feel like a lot of times in high school, it's kind of just like, oh, you can do art as a career, but it wasn't really explained like what those careers could be. It's kind of very generalized. So when my friend had talked about animation, I'm like, wow, that's like really cool. Like, what does that entail? So during those my junior and senior year, I started really looking into that and saying like, wow, this is awesome. And, you know, I didn't even realize that that could be an option for me because that wasn't what was kind of like around me at the time. So, yeah, like when I started, I didn't really have like a clear direction. I just knew that I wanted to draw and I wanted to focus in on that. And like now I have definitely like the studios or kind of like the films or ideas of films that I would really like to work on going forward.
Cool. So we definitely are going to get into that as well. For me, like Ruel, my mom migrated to America, and she was very clear to me in high school that you can't go to college outside of New York. Like we're just not paying for you to go like out of state. So basically find somewhere that you can do what you want to do. And it was pretty clear to my parents that I was very interested in computers and animation. And I was also getting a bit clarity of myself as an artist to know that traditional animation wouldn't work for me because I cannot draw the same thing over and over and it keep its same shape. That's not my specialty. So I did the computer art. And then granted, in going to computer art and, you know, you see the posters in the hallway, I was like, yeah, I want to be like an animator, like at Pixar and stuff like that. And by senior year, I wanted to do motion capture and work on GarageBand and stuff like that. And so now, as Ruel was saying, I actually just got a promotion to be a story editorial coordinator now at Netflix Animation. And we're going to go into like, thank you, some of that in-between journey of like, well, you started off, I started off, you know, wanting to be an animator, and then why am I in production management now? But there's so many odd jobs and things that I did in between, I guess, my senior year to even my first industry job was a PA at Blue Sky Studios. And that's really what I want us to start to dive into. Like after graduating SVA, I even worked at SVA for a couple months with Jimmy and Alex, and was like an administrative assistant. And what actually gave me insight to being that I could still work in animation and understand that I'm not as strong as an artist as I wanted to be, or animator as I wanted to be, but I can still work close with directors, was being an intern for the New York International Children's Film Festival. And by being that intern and I was having to coordinate the short films that we were going to screen, I was like, oh, well, this is really interesting. And I have the personality type that seems to, oh, someone's commenting about GarageBand. Was GarageBand the game? It was Rock Band was the game. That's where I wanted to work at, sorry. Working at the film festival now, and I was communicating with directors of short films, and the people that were my supervisors at the time, they're like, well, yeah, you can be a production assistant and, you know, go up that production management track, maybe look into being a producer, and you can still get to work on films and still be a part of the process. And, you know, if you want to continue doing art, you can do it like outside of the work hours. And that started to feel like it made sense to me too, because I am a person that struggles with feedback. Not that I can't handle it, but I'm just very sensitive. And I just needed maybe some more time to deal with that than straight out of college. Now, these are not your professors, but there's like money involved. And some people have very like, you know, intense personalities, and understanding that it's not you particularly, it's just them, it's just the process, it's just work. So if we can go around again, maybe we'll start with Joy this time to just share about some maybe random or odd jobs that you've done since SVA that, you know, still helped you along your journey, your career journey.
Let me think. I think maybe it might be before I came here, because after I graduated from SVA MFA, I'm just gonna be frank with you all. As international, you need visa. So every single job I get needs to be related to my degree. So after my MFA program, my first freelance job was working for Zusk, the commercial. So that was my first film that I ever did, and that leads me to box internship after. The random job, I guess, you want me to share that, or because my experience is kind of aligned with what I want to do so far. Outside of it is not feature film, it's I kind of dive into commercials more lately, besides feature film.
That's a good point. And then we'll probably come back to you with a different question, because I think that's something noticeable too, is just that like international students, because of your visa, everything that you take on or be a part of, it has to be intentional, and it has to be, like you're saying, related to your degree. So we will jump to Ruel.
Sure. And I just to kind of piggyback a little bit off something was said and then launch into this question. What I know now, or what I wanted after I graduated versus before, what I wanted before I went into SVA, obviously was very different, and SVA helped me shape that. I just wanted to do animation, and coming into SVA, I wanted to be a just Pixar Disney style, right? Of animation. And then by the end of SVA, I kind of had a more nuanced understanding of the business and different parts of it, to know that there are other studios out there. You know, there was a Tippet, you know, there was ILM, there were live action visual effects, hyperreal animation, Blur Studios. What's interesting enough is that right when I graduated, I wanted Blur Studios and Sony was my two favorite studios, because I fell in love with shorts. And Blur Studios at the time did a variation style-wise of shorts. They had like Gentleman's Duel, Go for Broke, Rockfish. And then Sony obviously had the Spider-Mans, but then they had like, you know, closer to the open season and Surf's Up style films. And so that nuance was developed going through SVA of what are the other areas of not just stylized character animation, but film and realistic. I was pretty fortunate as far as odd jobs, or not necessarily fortunate, but when I graduated, I got an internship in New York City, and in that, which parlayed into a couple commercials there. But I only spent a year there. What happened was I decided to go to SIGGRAPH in LA, and it was still at the time when it was in LA every year. I think they've kind of transitioned into it's in LA every other year, or it's moving around.
This
but it
year
was
is
still in
virtual.
LA. Yeah, everything is virtual this year, right?
Yes.
But at the time, it was every year it was in LA. And so I decided to go on 6 months notice to go there and submit my reel. And that was still when you were submitting your reel on DVDs. You had to physically bring your reel there, and then they watch it there. And the odd job that I got was at Digital Domain. They did not have an animation opening at the time. But they had match moving, tracking. And I didn't have an idea what that was at the time, but I just kind of asked, what is the software? And then at the time they mentioned Buju. So I went back to New York. I was staying in Brooklyn at the time. And I decided to learn what that was. And I ended up getting a job at Digital Domain in the tracking department, and that helped my understanding of the pipeline and the process. Because when you're an animator, you're mainly only worried about what's in your scene, what's in your camera frame. When you're in match moving or tracking, you are worried about, you're connected to every other department in the pipeline, and you have to prep things so that everyone downstream. And I think my love developed more for visual effects and visual effects style animation, and my career as well, because I started most of my work in visual effects style animation from that point. But it helped me develop my sense of the pipeline and process of animation and visual effects, to where now taking up this job as a VFX supervisor, I think there's a direct lineage from that job through animation to this particular job.
Can you just explain a little bit about what the tracking is?
Camera tracking. So camera tracking and match moving it's pretty much mimicking a simulation of what the physical camera on set did in the computer. So once they shoot plates, live action plates, and they're going to put some sense of visual effects or animated character in the scene, you use a particular software, and there are different software. There's PF Track, there's Buju, there's proprietary software, where you do a simulation identical to what the camera did on set, motion-wise, in the computer to the plates, so that when you put animation or character in your scene, it lines up with the plate, and it tracks along with the plate.
All right, thank you. Courtney?
So my jobs have kind of been all over the place. When I first graduated SVA, I worked as an intern at a film production studio called Insomnia TV. And they were a small production studio that worked on live action interstitials, which are basically just like commercials. And we mostly focused on mostly worked with A&E Networks, which basically is like A&E, Lifetime, History Channel, Discovery Channel, that kind of circuit, and a lot of the kind of like reality TV shows at the time that were big, like Storage Wars and things like that. So I worked from being an intern to being a production assistant or PA, and then I eventually became a project coordinator by the time I had finished working there. And I only worked in that field for about 2.5, 3 years. And then after that, I was just kind of like, I don't really want to do administrative things like as much as I was doing. So then that's when I kind of transitioned over and was like, well, now I feel like I have to kind of like redo my portfolio to show that I want those types of jobs. So since I was on Long Island, after I'd finished working in the city, I basically was in contact with a independent theater that was near me. And I basically set up a small film festival that was there. And I also did animation classes that were there. So I was trying to like slowly get back into what the technology we were using at the time. And also just to kind of like improve my own learning and things like that. So I did that through teaching because I could also get paid at the same time because I needed a job. So yeah, so I did that for a while. I worked at the independent theater. Then something completely far off the map, but I took up farming because again, I really liked sciences. So I thought I wanted to do agricultural science, but add my like animation and media background to that. And I did that for a while. And then weirdly through that, I had met an actress model, Isabella Rossellini, and she had a farm. And then from there, I started animating again with her and becoming her assistant. So it was just like, basically, I was just kind of like following my passions as far as jobs were concerned and just kind of like, excuse me, even if I wasn't doing animation specifically, like I would always tell people like, oh, you know, like I'm doing this job, like, can I help you design something? Or, you know, like I'm an artist first. And then, but I'm really passionate about these issues or these topics. So for me, if like someone was to look at like my resume or LinkedIn, they'd be like, wow, these are like really weird big jumps. But I always wanted to make sure that I was still within the realm of like the subjects that I really love and were really passionate. So for me, animation wasn't like this direct route. I, again, was trying to find basically a niche within the subjects that I liked and kind of tap into that and be the person that could help people create videos or animate or coordinate things. So yeah, it's a really weird.
No, but this is a big reason why I wanted you to be a part of this is that I do feel like your journey has been interesting. Just also kind of just watching it happen from what you share on social media. And when you started getting into the farming thing, I found that that was like, what is she doing over there? But what was cool about Courtney is like she was starting to, you were doing like almost like farming animated bumpers, I feel like, with like vegetables. And something that you were working on was like this coloring book thing. So can you talk a little bit about like that coloring book experience and journey? And maybe like you took like illustration classes and courses and stuff like that while at SVA. Did any of that come into play with like, I don't know, page layout and stuff like that?
Oh, definitely. Like basically everything that I took at SVA, I basically tried to, like, for instance, for the humanities classes, like I tried to take a lot of science classes, again, to still stay on that same page. So with illustration, with taking those humanities classes that I was really interested in, it definitely played a role in how I create art now. So like with the coloring book, for instance, like the coloring book was a way for me to keep adding to my portfolio. It's saying, you know, to kind of keep my drawing skills up to par, because with traditional animation, as you mentioned before, you know, it's drawing the same thing over and over and over again. So what was great with farming is because I was, again, really hyper-focused into that, I was able to see the plants over and over and over again and really kind of experience them at a different level. And it also brought to my attention like networks like say Discovery Channel and things like that. There's people that do the medical like animations, you know, in those programs, or, you know, kind of like simulations. So for me, once I started to see that, I noticed that I needed to have not just the art background, which I got from SVA because it was super intensive, but also just kind of educating myself on those types of topics. Because if you look at something like medical illustration, you need both a medical background and an illustrative background. So yeah, I always, whatever route I was taking, I always tried to put that into the work that I was doing at the time. So with the coloring book, it was just something that like I wanted to do and get out kind of my system, while also doing this very like labor intensive job during the day.
And gonna switch to Joy. Joy, now I think it's been two holidays maybe, I have received greeting cards from Joy. And I wish I actually had one on hand, but they've been super cute. So I know, Joy, you mentioned that you've started to take RISD classes, you know, before everything got shut down. And if you can just tell us a little bit about that experience, like why you went into that to take some classes, and maybe a little bit about this project with your greeting cards and illustrations.
Before that, as I listened to your talk about your stories, I want to piggyback what actually I did besides of my work. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Because I just remember now, outside of work, I also tried to build my resume. So, but back then, when you have your visa, you can only work for one company, so you can get other earnings from anywhere or other places at all. So I started doing a lot of work for associations, like Ruel mentioned, SIGGRAPH. That might be the first thing I did before my graduation. The first job was a student volunteer for SIGGRAPH. So that I learned how to be part of the team. I remember I was helping the 3D printing booth. One of the booths helped them set up and clean up the file that people submit for printing. I guess that kind of opened my first gateway to learn about 3D printing. And then after that, after I started my full-time job, sometimes working in commercials, it's ups and downs. It could be really slow and no job at all, and that drives me crazy. So I will go to so I joined the local SIGGRAPH New York chapter. I was the board member for a couple years, and then now I'm taking a break. And then before, I was just helping them making the Bring Your Animation Night banners for their monthly events. So using that opportunity to craft my skills, and also kind of network and meet more people. And I also was part of the Animation Night New York a little bit. I volunteered for a couple months. And then after that, I think did I meet you at the Woman in Animation? I forgot.
No, we actually met at this VR bar.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I think that was one of the events I went, and then also I spent some time last year mentoring some kids about their portfolio, be part of the Women in Animation. So I think those are the things I did that is kind of unrelated and sort of related to my career, but more into networking and broaden my spectrums. So now back to your the Rizzo questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. The reason I took that class was because I really missed that hands-on experience of making arts and prints. That's what I did back in school when I was in Taiwan for my BFA. It's a lot of painting, mixed media. So after working for, I guess this speaks for all industry, not just commercials, you always make something for your clients, right? You don't have the leverage or you don't have the freedom to make your own thing. And then after working this long, I just feel the urge to create something for myself as an artist. So I look into different continuing education classes, and then I found this one. One reason about Riso was it's actually a printer, so the file prepping process is very easy. It's like a very traditional way of printing. Is they have different inks cartridge, it's like 3 or 4, and then all the colors are very neon, and then which is like hard to recreate when you actually hire someone to print your greeting card and stuff. So, and this is also the closest to printmaking, but convenient enough that I don't need to buy a lot of equipment. So that's why I decided to take the Riso class, because first, the color is beautiful. It's hard to recreate. Second, is kind of authentic. Every single print, you have to print it one by one, and every color is once. Like, so you have a print with 3 colors, you have to print it 3 times on the same paper. So that's why I think that kind of resonates how that authentic feeling of creating your art, and every single piece of print is unique. So I think that was why, to fulfill my own needs as an artist, and also just to keep my passion going outside of work.
And Ruel, you have an interview series. I feel like that's what I've been seeing lately on your Instagram. Is it not a show?
Sorry, say that one more time.
Yeah, I
The
said,
interview series.
is it an interview series, like a travel show?
Oh, okay, yes. So my friends and I, my best friend, she's been a part of the military with her sisters for a long time, and over the years, we end up traveling a lot, individually, and they have an avid travel portfolio, and they love travel and everything about travel. And so in me moving into more storytelling, and directing and filmmaking, I pitched the idea to them that this could be a potential, starting with a visual podcast, which would turn into we're looking to potentially turn it into a travel show that we're going to pitch to networks. So I think, yeah, that's what you saw. Like I'm right after I finished on Black Panther, I told myself that I was ready to tell my own stories and ready to develop my own projects. And the interesting thing, and I'm guessing I'll just kind of gloss over it because you'll most likely bring this up. The interesting thing that I love about and realized later on about SVA is that we went to an art school, right? Our field is a technical field, but what was great was that we learned that technical field at an art school. And so 6, 7 years, 8 years in, the artist in you starts tapping you on the shoulder and say, remember, you're an artist, because you get out, you don't want to be a starving artist for too long. And so you get into the industry, you work, but then after some time you realize you're working. I realized I was becoming a button pusher, and I was becoming a button pusher for others, which I loved. I loved the experience. I loved learning. So right after Black Panther, I was like, I'm ready to tell my own stories. I'm ready to create my own projects. And that became one of them. And I've been loving, learning the craft, honing the craft. That's something that I developed at SVA. Knowing so many different departments. I worked in the lab assistant, and I worked in the AV department at SVA. So I worked in 2 different departments, and I was able to, on the the animation building, which is also the photography building. I at SVA on First Ave. I worked in the main building. I worked in every building, so I got to learn from different departments and people, and so that informed me as a storyteller down the line. And I love the process of right now honing my craft as a filmmaker, as a director, as a storyteller, not just in animation but in filming. And so that project has given me the opportunity, from a run and gun style, to do everything behind the camera: set up camera, run camera, light, set up audio, edit, pretty much go from script to screen in the process. And so, yeah, the project that you're referring to is one of the projects that I'm developing right now.
Okay. And I will say for me, what you're mentioning about like the artist in you starts tapping, that definitely, I feel like the tap came last year. when I did like 100-day, but actually only ended up doing 50 days of stop motion. And that made me be like the most creative I have ever been, probably since I was in at SVA. And by
It's
doing
the
that,
6 to 8 year mark. It's the six to eight
yeah,
year mark since you graduate. It's around that. It's
yeah,
around
I
that
think there's
number.
definitely a science to it. And now like I want to make like a super short film, going completely out of my comfort zone by doing stop motion, but I also want to incorporate like some 3D elements to it. So I'm like, trying to learn Blender and seeing what the big hype and deal is about.
Yeah.
But I would say that I found myself using, like, for right now, like I have a green screen behind me, and that's how
Yeah.
I'm able to have the virtual background. And all those type of things, from like doing those similar classes with like a logo design, or maybe you want to do like animate some text for like a bumper for something. I feel like I've never really let go of just that knowledge. And even with
Yeah.
hosting a podcast, from I don't remember what the audio program is now that we learned while in school, but all that still comes into play. Like,
Is it audio Adobe Sessions, or now I
no,
use
we used Pro Tools. That's what we
Pro
used.
Tools. Yeah.
Right. But like, whatever, using something else now. But audio is audio. Once you know how to do a thing, it's really just learning
Yeah.
the buttons in a new software to
The
get the
software
results.
will always change. That's one of the biggest things in 16 years. The software will evolve, the tools will evolve, the tools will change. But what SVA in New York City in particular shaped me is the lens I view art through. We all have plans coming out of school, but then the universe laughs. And it's a thing that I've learned. You have a lot to offer the universe, but the universe also has a lot to teach you. And that kind of clash is your experience as an artist. And having SVA, I think, as opposed to just going to a technical school, really helped me, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. And then a little bit of like what Courtney was saying earlier too, and just taking some of these electives and classes. Like I took a children's illustration book class, and that taught me a lot about like just how large children's illustrations usually are to be downsized to a book. And I took silk screening, and after college, like I printed off some tote bags and like sold them. And it's just like, just random things that you end up doing then, and just seeing how they come into play later on can be pretty helpful. I do want to go back around before we start opening up to questions. If people have questions, if everyone could just go around and say maybe what advice can you give to this group that's watching about pivots that you may end up making or encountering as you're going through this career journey, maybe even while you're in school, to just kind of immediately after school, about you think you're going to do one thing and you end up doing another thing, or exploring all your different interests that you have. If there's any advice, we can start with you, Ruel.
Awesome. Yeah. So I think that was one of my main points that I wanted to hone in on for this talk. I was, Courtney, I think I honestly want to say you're in rarefied air, because being able to mesh both, your science and your love for stuff outside of art with your art, right? I was, with a margin of 2 years prior to 2 years after me, or 3 years prior to 2 years after me, I was of the first generation that went to school for animation, for 3D animation, where you could actually go do a full BFA program. Before that, it might have been a class, it might have been a course. A lot of the folks that were in the industry had just, there was a computer open at a VFX studio and they kind of learned it on their own. So they had a lot more experience outside of animation, that they worked before they got into animation. And because animation and visual effects, computer animation and visual effects was coming into itself for the most part in the late 90s, early 2000. And so I think a lot of, and it is a very technical space. So a lot of folks, I kind of went in and I got one of my first jobs was the computer lab, a lab assistant, and then the AV department. And so I didn't have much outside world experience, or just like job experiences or life experiences outside of being an artist and wanting to do animation. And so I was always worried about that going in. So I think you having a different thing as far as your sciences and, you know, your social things definitely comes to play later on down. The older you get, the more you realize it definitely helps. As far as the things that have changed, I get a lot of those questions from students now, being 16 years in, since I graduated SVA, and the worry, especially now with the pandemic, and, you know, students are having a tough time coming out of college in this. What I will say is that's always going to happen, and for better, for worse, it's going to inform yourself as an artist. Remember that you're an artist, and the scenario, your environment, the culture, situations will inform, and you will be able to adapt and view and express yourself through that lens of being an artist and the things around you, and realize how powerful that is. My second year of college, I lived in a GW dorms. It's no longer a GW dorms. It's way nicer than a GW dorms now, but I lived in a GW dorms. I woke up.
I live there too.
You live there too? I lived on the 6th floor. And so I woke up the second week of my sophomore year to people running in the hallway because a plane had hit the towers in 9/11. And we ran up to the solarium and looked out the window and watched the second tower fall in front of us. And that changed the scope of everything as an artist, as a person, as a New Yorker, for the next 3, 4, 10, 15 years, right? And no one is expecting that, right? And so there are always going to be tragedies and circumstances and things that will inform you as an artist and pivot in how you move. And 5 years after I graduated and I was in the industry, the recession hit. And we had to maneuver and pivot and evolve as an artist. You know, it affected people who were seniors in the industry, who had 10 years in the industry. That probably cost a lot. And it affected students directly coming out of school who they weren't hiring because they didn't have any experience. And obviously what was fortunate for me, I had just enough experience to get more, you know, responsibilities, and I didn't cost as much as the veterans. So, you know, I was able to take advantage of any opportunity, whether there's a glimmer of hope or there was a great opportunity. And now you're seeing another element of that, right? With this pandemic. When I also got to LA, a lot of the work was still in the US, and it was like Vancouver wasn't a thing. London was a little bit of a thing. Montreal, Toronto wasn't a thing as far as work. And a lot of that work has shifted, especially being an animator. A lot of it is, the feature work is being done in Vancouver now, and Montreal is kicking up, and London is going. And so it is going to change. The scenario, the circumstance, the environment, it's going to change, it's going to evolve. I think what will stay the same is you being an artist and seeing yourself as an artist and looking through the lens of that. And just, you know, all of that is going to change, but you're going to be an artist. And so that would be my message.
Okay. Do you want to Joy?
This is a tough question because I would say don't get discouraged during this time, even though it is hard to graduate during the pandemic and quarantine. But I can tell you some facts from work that actually animation job has been rising because this couple months you cannot do live actions, right, Ruel? Did that affect your job? Because for my commercial company, we got more cases at Buck. We have more projects to do because everything is shifted to become like motion graphics and animation. So I think one important thing is how do you advocate yourself as an artist for your online social media presence? How can people find you? Because that's one important thing that I learned. I just got some email lately about there's some people looking for architecture rendering, which I cannot do. So anyone recent grad, you want to do architecture rendering, message me, I'll pass that info to you. But I'm saying that there's a lot of actually like virtual rendering and remote work happening, which is great benefit, because say you want to stay in New York, but Pixar, Disney looking for apprenticeship, but it's in Burbank, maybe you can still apply because right now everything is remote. So I think you can take that opportunity to reach out even more. The whole United States you can reach out to, right? Because now you have the advantage of remote working. And then I think the other thing is, how do you stay, like, I think you need to stay kind of like mental health wise, just how do you keep yourself calm and emotional, like, how do you say it? You can navigate your emotional progress. I know this is not related to the question, but to me, I think
it's fine. It's fine. It's still important. It's important.
Yeah, it's absolutely related to it, I think.
Because lately, I got pulled into our diversity and inclusion committee at my company, and then we just joined the 3% conference, and then we talk about how do you like manage your emotion when this whole pandemic is like driving everyone crazy, and then the job, and then people expect you to work longer because you're always home. So I think it's definitely important to set a time for you to take a break, and then to like even take a walk, and stuff like that might help you thrive longer during this time. And as for looking for job, when I started, I have a long list of every single company I apply with the account I set up with what day I apply. I recommend all the students, because they have been asking like these type of questions, and I think you should do a tracking list of when you apply and 3 months after you do a follow-up, because it's not that they don't see you, they're just too busy with all the applicants. And then it's important to be persistent and dedicated that, oh, I'm available. Every 3 months you send a updated portfolio telling them I'm free again, this is my updates and stuff. So even when someone reach out to you, you are on another job, you can say I'm currently booked, which makes you seem popular, but but also you can just let them know that you want to work with them. So I think there's some like strategic things you can do to help you get started. So yeah.
Yeah, I want to say I had the same document, I guess, up until like last year. The same document from like when I graduated, with all the companies that like I've applied to and the date that I applied. And I also had another column for like if I ever heard from them or if they like declined or rejected me, just just to keep record of it.
You need to add that.
Yeah. So I think that's really good. Courtney, I'm gonna swing it to you if you have any advice before you open up to Q&A.
Yeah, I would just say like embrace it. Like, I know it's very hard, especially during this time. It's just like, oh, I really want to do this, but I think a lot of us have that anxiety of like, oh, I want to do this, or I want to apply for this job, or I just really need a job in general. And to kind of piggyback onto what Joy said about like, kind of like your mental well-being and things like that. When the pandemic started, I was working with Isabella, and then because her job stopped, that meant my job stopped. So right after I was let go, I didn't like do anything for quite a few weeks. It was just very hard for me to kind of reevaluate and reassess like which direction I was going to go in. But also what I did, and what Monique and Joy were talking about, is writing down like a list of things that you're good at. Also writing, like, I have a full-on like I use this app called Notion, and basically I wrote down like all of the technical skills that I have, all of the soft skills that I have, all of the companies that I applied to, any kind of interests because I think what kind of helped me stay afloat during the pandemic, even after losing my full-time job, was that because I kept telling people that I was an artist, it just so happened that with the pandemic, there's a lot more animation jobs and illustration jobs available. So after that time, after I got let go, I actually got animation jobs, which is pretty awesome. And, a really weird, I didn't expect that. I didn't think that I was going to really do anything. I thought I was just going to kind of be sitting at home like most people and kind of wondering, what my next steps are. But just embrace what's going on right now. Try to keep up with how the trends are going, because it feels like a lot of things are going to be remote. So just trying to, focus on that, focus on your mental health, because, you can't really do anything otherwise. And I think that's mostly it.
Yeah.
Hey, Monique, can I piggyback? Do you mind if I piggyback real quick?
Sure.
I wanted to, because I didn't answer the this coming out of school right now and the type of jobs and how you go about that. For me, it's the age-old saying of, it's who you know that gets you in the door, and it's what you know that keeps you in the door. A big thing for me that I think SVA and computer art helped me was my peers, the people that I graduated with, the other students. Knowing a good amount of folks, maybe say 2 years above me, and then keeping in contact with folks 2 years beneath me. Like this field, it's not a solo artist field, right? It takes a team, it takes a crew to do a lot of the stuff. And I think a lot of my jobs early on is from people that I went to school with, and friends, other animation, visual effects folks that I met after I graduated. And so definitely, lean into the people that you graduated with, lean into the community, make friends, always hone your craft. There's so much you're going to learn in college from a technical standpoint, and the tools and this and that. If I compare my 2 years after I graduated college versus my 4 years, I learned a lot more from a technical standpoint and an experience standpoint in the 2 years after. So getting out, honing your craft is the most important thing. And just leaning into the people, leaning into, keep talking to your friends. Your friend might get a job somewhere and they might say, hey, we're looking for someone, and then you get referred. A lot of jobs still come that way, even 16 years in.
Yeah. So I guess my 2 cents is I'm very much like Courtney in the sense that for the opportunities and things that I do, I like to make sure that it still has some sort of connection with animation or art related. So I just, as we're all just saying, in that the various things are going to just come up in life in general, things that we don't anticipate, from it being something as huge as a pandemic to something more personal, like maybe some grief or something you're experiencing in life. And it is important that when you do have to make a change or you're adapting, to just hold on to your original intention of why you're doing this thing or why you're interested in this thing. We're all very passionate about art or animation, movies, movie making. So sometimes also using that vessel to cater to your mental health in doing something that maybe you don't end up putting on social media or your website, but it's just fun for you to do. I like painting, but I don't feel comfortable sharing paintings on social media, but it's just a liberating experience. And, and it's just that sometimes you need those type of entities or things to do that's not related to work or to put in your portfolio, that could just be a bit freeing. And from having that moment, it usually allows you to help deal with whatever's happening in real life at the time better, you know, because you gave yourself that space and that opportunity. So I am not sure how Q&As work, if we'll have you unmute if you have a question or if you want to drop things in the chat. But we've answered all the questions I've written down.
I mean, whatever is best for you, Monique, and
Okay.
if it helps, Alex or I can moderate. But
Yeah.
we found it works really well to have people unmute.
Okay. So we're here.
Yeah, I have a question. Oh wait, can you guys hear me?
Yeah. Nicole, can you tell us which major you're in and your like graduation date, please?
Yeah, I already graduated, so I graduated this year, and I'm in computer art. I
Cool.
graduated in computer art. So I've had like, especially now with the pandemic, I've only had like little small jobs, like little temporary things. But about the topic of like finding your niche and like maybe wanting to pivot on your interests. I know, Courtney, you were talking about maintaining an interest in science, and Monique, you were talking about being a PA at one point. So when you get a new opportunity that's maybe more long-term, is this an interest that you should bring up rather than being like, I want to be such and such in X number of years? It should be like, I love doing this, but here are the sort of goals that I'd like to reach in the future. Sort of maybe that the supervisors can push you in that direction, or should you just let that maybe happen naturally? What are your thoughts?
You know, for me, I've actually been encountering that a little bit, especially as like I found myself job hunting for a year last year. And even before coming out of college, I had to really convince a lot of people that I was fine not being an artist during the 9 to 5 like work day. And I'm fine being an artist on the weekends and stuff like that. So for me, even navigating my time now, I feel it's important to have definitely some aspect of transparency to say, well, you know, my ultimate career dream or goals is to produce and direct, you know. However, at the moment, I really want to learn more about the production pipeline. So regardless of if I'm in a PA in story or animation or modeling, you know, I want to learn as much as I can from this area or this level that I'm at right now. So maybe like wording, yeah, and then I think you do have to be a bit transparent because people can help you too.
Right.
Does anyone else want to chime in?
Also, I think, yeah, transparency is really big because you never know if someone's kind of like what their timeline of like growth is as well, like what the next project is, or like, for instance, when I worked with Isabella, I started off doing animations with her. Then she was like, hey, I need an assistant. Can you help me? And I was like, yeah, sure. Why not? Like, might as well stick with this connection and, you know, kind of keep going with it. And then when I was telling her kind of like my dreams and also just the kind of topics that I was interested in, like I got other opportunities. So like she specifically did a one-woman play for her master's degree, which is in behavioral science. And one of the technical directors at the time, he had something to do, so they needed a TD to fill in. So because I expressed interest in, you know, being in the arts, being interested in the topic of science and technology in general, she was just like, hey, if you can learn this, then, you know, you can be a second TD to fill in. So for me, I like, no matter what job I'm doing, even if it's like retail, I'm just kind of like, oh yeah, you know, like I want to do these art things. You never know like who is working towards the same goal and what opportunities they have for you, because that really kind of dictated how I pivoted. So I didn't realize that like a technical director in theater was this thing versus a technical director in animation, which is a completely different thing. So yeah, just always be like open and transparent, and you never know who's like interested in the same things. And I think that's also kind of how you network,
Right.
is by being true and honest to what you're about.
Yeah, I would say, if you don't mind, I would say it's obviously it's a balance, right? You're coming into the field. You're an animator, or you
Yeah, I guess so. I'm more of like a look development person.
look development.
Yeah.
So especially when you're entering into the field, right? You just recently graduated. The field, especially commercials and even visual effects and film schedules now, it's next person up, all hands on deck, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so entering into, you want to be as open as possible. You want to, this is your opportunity to try everything, to try different aspects of it, the pipeline, the field, and you're most likely going to do that coming in,
Yeah.
because you're the lowest on the totem pole. And it's a good space to be because you get to shadow, you get to learn, you get to ask a lot of questions, you get to, fail forward. And I would say coming in, I would say maybe slightly wait until you're comfortable, you've gotten your footing.
Yeah.
You're comfortable, you show that you have a clear understanding and grasp of what you're doing at that moment, and then you can maybe share if that's not asked in the interview process. I would say do that, and then you can share a little bit later. That could be a couple months, what have you, because you don't want to come in and have your eye on something down the line and give off the feeling that, well, this is just, you don't really care about this part of it that much. You just want to get to where you want.
Right.
And a
That's
lot
a
of
good
time
point.
in commercial production things, it's so fast paced, and it's just, next hands up, right? We need help here, kind of thing. So that was just wanted to drop my 2 cents.
Yeah.
Can
Thank
I
you.
chime in?
Oh yeah, of course.
Nicole, are you doing a commercial work now or gaming?
The last 2 things I got were for like concepts for like an episodic thing, but
So more 2D job?
yeah, it was like, well, they wanted a 3D concept for something, so both of them were.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm actually doing look development too at work. And then I noticed, so when I started intern, I was a modeler, and I told them I'm actually good at texture and painting. So, and then later on, I found out Disney, Pixar, they also have a title called look development, and that's how I know this title. And then I noticed a lot of time you can look at their portfolio. If whoever is a look dev artist for certain movies, you can look at their reel. And then I noticed a lot of them focus on very specific props and then close-up shots, and then those are great presentation of how you can bring details from your like say you're doing 3D concept, but maybe you can bring it to the next level, which is very helpful to work in New York if you work for commercials, because usually it's a lot of product rendering. So maybe you can look into that. And then some of your classmates are great too. I talked to Brian Long. He's a great look dev artist too. I think that look at your peers and then how they focus on that aspect. And I think look dev is very broad. So it's good that you're doing what you're doing, because look dev including modeling, a little bit concept, texture, lighting, and comp. So it just takes time. And then, so just keep going. And then I think it's always important also to vocalize and advocate for yourself. Because after a couple of years, I told them I really want to do lighting. So I slowly start taking more shots as a lighting TD. So I think you should definitely piggyback with what everyone said, but also slowly vocalizing what you want, tell the supervisor, because slowly they remember it. And then one day they will say, oh, Nicole want to do this. Maybe she can try it.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Do we have another question?
I was just gonna ask, how has your like daily routines changed? Have you found either more or less time to yourselves? I've personally found that I haven't been able to, I recently graduated from computer art as well, with a hope to focus on animation, but I've been finding it difficult to sort of like, I guess, there's a lot of jobs out on offer. I don't hear back from like most of them. uh, but I was wondering like how you get through your routine, mostly because I personally find it like I've been doing a routine, I'm just not sure if it's enough.
Do you have a job at the moment, or are you?
I'm actually part of an internship right now, but it's kind of separate from what I was hoping to do, because I was hoping to do 3D animation, but it's more of a almost graphic design, motion design internship. I really love the sort of design component of it, but it is not character animation, which is like not what I was going to focus on, but I do think that it's valuable experience. It's just, unfortunately, it is not paid, but it is a position where I can keep myself feeling, productive.
Okay, so for me, I have been struggling too. So I'm hoping that one of my other panelists will be able to provide some good tips and resources for us.
I could jump in a bit if someone else wants to jump in before. Let me know. All right, so I'll give you the funny story of it. This year, I went into this year saying I'm going to officially retire from being an animator and focus on my directing in live action, right? And COVID said, hold my beer, right? And so I'm the guy that's trying to go change his direct profession to live action production, shoot films, when no one is live action shooting production films. And so I finally mustered up the courage to like fully commit, because, the more you climb in this industry and you get a couple years under your belt, you get a couple cool projects under your belt, it can get, comfortable, right? And I knew I wanted to get into storytelling and be a filmmaker and direct as well. And so I've been talking about it, but haven't committing. And this year, so I finally mustered up the courage to say, okay, this is the year. This is the year I'm going to make that transition. And this was January. And then everything turned, like literally the entire globe said, we're going to sit down. And I was just like, how does this happen? Like, what is the universe trying to tell me? But I think what has helped me is the buddy system for accountability, leaning on your friends, your colleagues, your family, other people within the space of the career that you're in and the place that you're in. So coming out of college, you want to be an animator, talking to other animators that are in the industry, asking for advice. And I would say the good thing, the silver lining with everything right now, mind you, it doesn't apply too much to animation because there's a rise in animation jobs. But as moving into my writing and directing, normally if you take a break and you want to chill and just kind of either hone your craft or do something else, you're getting off the escalator, right? And the escalator is continuing to move. And so you have that sense of there's a running clock. And the interesting thing about this, as me moving into directing, everyone is off the escalator. We all have to take a chill pill. And so that gave me a couple, 2 to 3 to 4 months to just relax, right? Because I was launching out of my career in animation and visual effects into like this rush of trying to get my foot in and, make my first feature film. And I was able to just chill, work on my projects, hone my craft. We were all sitting at home. And so I was like, okay, what can I do? My mental health, my creative zen, start working on my stories. And so as an animator coming out of college, I remember when I graduated the summer of 2004, I felt this sense of there's a running clock and I need to get in the industry and I need to get a job somewhere. And Maya graduated this year, Maya Mendoza. And I told her, here is your moment for the next 7 months to just hone your craft, just develop your love and passion for animation. wake up every day and just say, I'm going to learn something new. I'm going to animate. I'm going to develop my passion for it. And if you have that opportunity, obviously, if you're in a position where you have to pay bills, then, you have to pay bills. But if you have the opportunity to be at home, just, learn, hone your craft, spend these next 6 to 8 months, doing some 11-second club stuff, sending it to an animator and getting feedback that's in the industry, emailing people. That's what I would say. Develop your love and your own for your craft right now. Spend the next couple 6 months, 7 months, if you have the opportunity to just practice your animation.
Thank you for answering my question. I actually also was wondering what you guys have your views on real-time rendering. I personally am interested in Unreal and Unity and how they've really pushed the boundaries with Unreal with its current version, and they're making it so that you can have all these really honestly terrible geometry and still make it work in real time with what essentially looks like gorgeous graphics with the highest pixel count I've ever seen in my entire life. And apparently they didn't have any load times in their showcase for it. And I was kind of like, well, I'm still concerned as somebody who wants to also potentially develop games or something. Like, does this control, like how many bones can I have in this in that rig that they were using? It looks Pixar level with Tomb Raider quality, and I was like, all right, but how much technical jargon do I need to understand before I can make this? Because I really would like to make something like that.
That's kind of the space that I've been in for the past 4 or 5 years. If you would like to learn, Unreal is the next wave within animation and visual effects. It is the next wave. Everyone is dumping resources, money into it. And so from a technical standpoint, a skill set standpoint, if you have any slither of interest in learning Unreal or real time, even if it's just being good at the software, learn it right now. The first, outside of the traditional game engine, right, and making games, the first time I used, as a part of a project was Jungle Book. The cool thing about where Unreal is becoming Unreal time is becoming the intersection of creating and filmmaking, not just the end part of where the art, the animation or the project is displayed, but in creating it. So they used, Unreal and Unity on the back end to reverse create Jungle Book and then Lion King. And then you've seen what they're doing with Mandalorian, where they're using it to project for LED volumes, so that to replace green screens, right? If any one of you have Apple TV, and you can look at the Disney galleries, Jon Favreau did when he sits down with ILM and Disney execs and the actors and the directors, and he talks about the volume that they're building and how they use Unreal to do it. And there's a group on Facebook called, Unreal Engine. They've been like diving into that. So if you are interested in real time, definitely learn it. It is going to be at least for the visual effects side of the industry, and obviously the intersection of game and VR, it is going to be the cornerstone. And I want to say in the next 2 to 5 years.
And I want to chime in to say that on the feature film side, they are tinkering with Unreal for like previs, because you can, get some quick lighting, some dummy textures before you even go on and do full out, do that work, bid it out. So I think if you are interested, in Unreal and in those departments like modeling, texturing, lighting, it's not going to hurt at all for Unreal, because they're going to be looking for that,
Rumor has it they're trying to get rid of Motion Builder and go straight from Maya to Unreal. That's been in the talks for like 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
So
I think I can speak from the commercial side. I think it's definitely beneficial because there's a lot of short turnaround project with no budget They just like 1-2 weeks. And then if you count all the render time, there's no way you can finish like a 30 seconds in 2 weeks, right? But so there is a talk about like potentially learning Unity and Unreal, and maybe you can quickly build up that set and then produce that commercial for your clients. So that could be a future. And then gaming seems pretty promising. But I'm curious though, so you want to focus in Unreal, but also character animation? These are all very different disciplines.
Yeah.
I think you might need to pick one.
I'm a little all over the place, yeah.
Because character animation is very like, I have a lot of friends who want to focus on that, and then it's gonna be like what Ruel said, just it's gonna be a long career where you slowly build up, and every month you might do a body system, I say, with a lighter, because some of the recent graduate as a lighter, they need portfolio, right? So you can parent with them, and then like they can make portfolio for them and for you. So I don't know, but what are you thinking?
I am actually working with a group of, we're now alumni, all recent graduates of the same class. We're trying to kick off a project that we're going to be working on for, it looks like about half a year, to produce essentially an Unreal.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm extraordinarily lucky that one of them wants to be a producer, the other one specializes in modeling and light, and we have a lighter, so we have a lot of the specialties, and I'm very excited to learn a lot from them. And I've been placed in charge of dynamics in Unreal, so I'm like, yeah,
that's great.
Gotta go learn that stuff now.
Maybe gaming is your industry then.
I just I guess it's just because like I'm unsure as to what to focus on, because I do enjoy them both very much.
I can explain that. I can give you, do you want the hopeful answer or do you want the realistic?
Just get the real answer. I don't want hope.
Okay. All right. So a lot of the feature level animation has left the US, right? It's a lot more previs based character animation that's in the US. Now, obviously you have Pixar, you have Disney, you have DreamWorks, and you have Blue Sky, right? So if your goal is to 100% work there or nothing, then yes, focus all your aspects to lightning rod to, I want to work at Pixar, I want to be a Blue Sky animator, I want to be a Disney or a DreamWorks animator. That's, as an animator within the US, it obviously becomes more challenging because a lot of the work is now in London, and I'm in London, Vancouver, Montreal. And a lot of them are still using like India, Singapore. All these places have headquarters outside where a lion's share of the feature and animation work is done. And within the US, it's becoming more previs / commercial based. So that's what I would say, you know, look at, I would say on your plate, put Unreal. And then that gets you in the door, and still learn animation and still push your animation, right? And because a lot of the jobs that I get now is when there is like overthrow, right? Like overspill. So once they've geared up, once the headquarters like DD or the Mill or Sony or whoever has geared up in London or in Vancouver, and they have overspilled, they filled out and they need a couple more animators, they will reach out here. And so a lot of the times, because I now know motion capture, I now work in VR, I can piggyback my character animation skill set on that, right? And so that's what I would say. It's, you know, hopefully it's not too pessimistic, but I've seen the industry change so much.
That's actually really, really helpful. Thank you so much, because that helps me figure out what to really focus on. I think based on that answer, I might put my like animation almost on the back end and start really digging into Unreal to get a better understanding of that and hopefully get my foot through the door with it.
Yep.
mostly because I feel like I've always felt that the animation portion was both highly competitive and really, really tiny, even though it's large.
Very
and small.
saturated.
So,
But there's a lot of indie gaming studios in New York, and then if you know animation, you can expand it to like motion design, which is also pretty popular in New York, and I think you can still do animation in Unreal. So it looks like it's definitely more promising than featured character animation job because it's like the bar is so high and then it's the gap is tiny. So, but not saying that you can't get it, but to start with your career that is more futuristic and promising, I do agree with him that I think Unreal might be the future, seems like.
Jimmy or Alex or Xiang, do we have time for one more question?
Sure. Yeah, I think one last question to wrap it up would be great.
Okay, this is your time. Ooh. Nope.
I guess on the I guess on the topic of technology and like programs, how do you react to how do you process and react to like news that ripples through like the CG world? Because just recently as like trying to learn look development, there's like this whole like Substance Painter versus like Mari, and then just recently I guess like Substance Painter introduced like Udemy, their Udemy's updates, and I'm just getting like frustrated because then there's like different companies that prefer this program and different companies that I guess like just like juggling between these two programs. Is there any point in which you guys decide to just let go and just put all of your eggs into one basket, or just continue juggling for as long as possible until you just see that eventually that certain skill is being taken out?
So, if I am understanding correctly, is your question more like how important is it to keep up with software and like maybe software updates as opposed to, I don't know, or maybe just leave it like that? Would you say?
Yeah,
Okay.
just like because then all these updates is just frustrating sometimes, I guess.
Okay.
I can't speak for that. I think this sounds kind of, I hope it's hopeful to say this because I actually learned Substance Painter at work. I didn't know this at all when I started. But I think what is important is as an artist is how you see and how you recreate what you see. So I would say as long as you are proficient in one, I think the other one are pretty much similar. I use Mari a little bit. I think they are quite the same idea of layering and how you create high-res textures, because I think when you enter a different company, they might have different preference of different software. Even at Blue Sky, it's like procedural, right, for their shading department. And I don't know about Disney and Pixar, but I would say, yes, yeah. So I think you don't have to worry too much about it because what important is like when you show reel and why you show them. If you can achieve certain level of realism or the stylized assets that you made, which I see you already did, and then I think you don't have to be too worried about it. That's what my take.
Yeah, I would echo the same sentiments. Learn the techniques, learn the principles. There won't be a last time where you won't have to learn a software on the job. And so pick the one that you're good at and then showcase your skill level and technique and learn all the principles. And the job or the studio will dictate what software you're going to use. I started using Maya when it was still Alias Wavefront. And so now,
I started Mental Ray, right?
There you go. And so
old.
It wasn't a year when it wasn't like 2018. You know what I mean? The version wasn't a year. It was like a version 5, 6. And so the difference between that software and this one, and having to learn when I got in learning the proprietary, as you mentioned, a lot of studios have proprietary software depending on where you go. So just focus on your technique and your skill set and your principles.
Courtney, did you have?
I can't really like talk to so much of the software, but as far as like learning wise, like I know like for me, I was always just really interested in a lot of things, but I heard about this concept like T-shaped learning, where basically you kind of like maybe learn about some of the programs that you're interested in, but then kind of dive deep into a program, kind of like what Ruel said, like that you're interested in and that you really like. So, you know, just kind of thinking about it that way as well. Like, yes, you can keep up, but it's very hard because technology is always changing so rapidly. So as long as you're open, you know, I think that's also important to factor in as well.
Yeah, and so lastly, I'll chime in on a observation from production management. Where I am right now, they are almost constantly experimenting with software. So even something we were using 3 weeks ago, we're like, oh, what if we try this, or what if we use this? And I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon. And then also, I work in story department, and they allow the story artists to use kind of whatever program they're most comfortable in, because they ultimately want a result. So depending on the studio, maybe where you end up, they could be more flexible about what you're using, because as Joy's saying, they want to make sure you can just deliver the work, you know, properly. So thank
Thank you so
you.
much, guys.
Yeah, everyone, that concludes our time today. Thank you for having us. I feel like it was a really good discussion. Got to learn more about everyone. And
Thank you. Thank you for
congrats.
having me.
Yeah, congrats to
Thank
for
you.
our recent grads, and for if everyone is still in undergrad, you know, going to school remotely, virtually during a pandemic is wild. And I feel like we couldn't imagine doing what you're doing right now. So like applause to you too for sticking and pushing through.
Yeah,
Yeah,
don't give
I
up.
agree.
Yeah, I think
Don't stop learning.
if you students want to turn on your camera just for a minute to thank our panelists, that would be great. I really appreciate all of our panelists for coming, and a special thanks to Monique for organizing this.
Yeah.
And bringing
Thank you, Monique. Thank you
Thank you,
so much for
Monique.
doing
Thank you
this.
so much.
You're
And
welcome.
don't